Alright, how's everybody doing out there in Math Magic Land? It's Miss Muscarella coming at you, and in this video we're going to solve some radical equations, but this time the variable is going to be underneath the radical, which means here's your radical and there is my variable. Maybe it's an x, or perhaps maybe it's an x plus 3, all underneath the square root. Or maybe it's not a square root, maybe it's a cube root. Or maybe instead of writing it as a radical, we actually write it as an exponent. So maybe it's x plus 3, and we know that if I have a little 3 right there in my index, that's going to be to the 1/3 power. So you're going to look at problems that involve radicals like this. Let's go ahead and take a look at our first example. Alright, so in this example, we're going to solve the equation 2b plus 2 underneath the square root minus 3 equals negative 15. Now the very first thing you're going to do is, of course, move that minus 3 over to the other side. So you have 2b plus 2. Now instead of writing a square root, I'm going to write that to the 1/2 power equals, now negative 15 plus 3 is negative 12. Now to get rid of a square root or something to the 1/2 power, what you're going to do is raise it to the reciprocal power, which of course the reciprocal of 1/2 is 2, or 2 over 1. And then the same thing on the other side. I'm going to multiply or have the other side to the same exponent, same power, so squared. Now negative 12 squared, so negative times negative of course gives me positive. That's going to be 144. And then on the right hand side, or on the left hand side, the 1/2 and the 2, they're going to cancel out and they're going to be gone. So the only thing I'm going to be left with is just 2b plus 2 on the left. And then I'll have 2b equals 142, and of course when we divide by 2 we'll end up getting 71. So that's the answer that I came up with. Checking our solutions will look like this. We'll write down the word check. We'll write down the original problem, 2b plus 2 square root of that minus 3 equals negative 15. Now this is kind of nice because we just want to see if we get negative 15 on the left and we're good to go. So if we put in 71, so 2 times 71 plus 2, all that underneath the square root, and then minus 3 equals negative 15, and then 2 times 71, that is 142, then plus 2, all that, and then minus 3 equals negative 15, and then 142 plus 2 is 12, or is 144, I'm thinking ahead here. Square root of 144 minus 3 equals negative 15, and then square root of 144 is, of course, 12. 12 minus 3 equals negative 15, and 12 minus 3 is 9 equals negative 15. So check that out. I get an answer, but it does not work. So this answer, b equals 71, is actually extraneous. So there is no solution to this equation. And if you kind of think about it too for a moment, this part that's underneath the square root, we know the domain of anything, this blob that's underneath the square root, we know that that's got to be positive. And when we added that negative 3 to the other side and came up with that being equal to negative 12, there's no way you can square root something and end up with a negative answer. So even though mathematically we're able to get a value of 71, when we go ahead and check that, we know, boom, that's not going to happen. So this first example is extraneous. Now let's go ahead and take a look at a second example. So here we've got x minus 1 to the 2/3 plus 2 equals 6. Now if I move the 2 over, I'll get x minus 1 to the 2/3 equals 6 minus 2 gives me 4. So the reciprocal power of 2/3 is going to be 3/2. So the 2/3 power, and then I'm going to have this to the 3/2 power equals number 4 to the 3/2 power. Now this is kind of nice. I'm going to do this over here on the side for a second, because when you have 4 to the 3/2 power, what I want to do is kind of focus on this part right here, because that is going to be the same thing as 4 to the 1/2 power cubed. And then 4 to the 1/2 power is the same thing as a square root of 4, which we all know is just 2. So if I take 2 and then of course cube that, that's just going to give me 2 to the 3rd power is 8. So all this on the right hand side is just going to end up giving me 8. And on the left hand side, remember these guys, boom, boom, they cancel out because they're just going to be 1, in which case that'll have my x minus 1 drop down. And when you move the negative 1 over, of course, you'll get a value of x equals 9. Now, let's check this guy and make sure that it is not extraneous. All right, so when we do that, we'll write down the original problem and then substitute in the values we get. So x minus 1 to the 2/3 plus 2 equals 6. Okay, this is our check, so of course we want to identify that by writing the word check. Now we got 9, so we're going to have 9 minus 1 to the 2/3 plus 2 equals 6. Now, 9 minus 1 is 8, so 8 to the 2/3 plus 2 equals 6. Now this part right here, 8 to the 2/3, again, so what I'm going to do over on the side here is I'm going to go 8, and I'm going to rewrite that as 1/3 power and then squared on the outside. Now 8 to the 1/3 is the same thing as the cubed root of 8. And the cubed root of 8, of course, is 2. So if I take that and I square that, 2 squared, of course, is 4. So that's going to be 4, and then plus 2 equals 6. 4 plus 2, boom, 6 equals 6. Yeah, that one works. So 9 is, in fact, our solution to this. I like it. Cool, let's do one more. All right, so for our third and final example here, we've got 2t plus 15 underneath a radical equals t. Now, 2t plus 15 is the same thing as 2t plus 15. If we have it underneath a square root, that's the same thing as the 1/2 power equals t. Now, some people might do this step here like this, or maybe you can see this up here, but either way you're going to square it to get rid of the 1/2 power or the radical. And then of course we square t, and t squared is just t squared. On the left hand side we'll have our 2t plus 15. Now what we're going to do is actually get all our terms on the same side. So that's going to look like this. 0 equals t squared minus 2t minus 15. So we want to get everything on one side and then 0 on the other side. Now this will end up being a quadratic, which will factor nicely. And if you don't see the factoring right away, you can always use quadratic formula to help you out there. Make sure you keep your writing nice, neat, and organized. So the two factors that will give me a product of negative 15 and a sum of negative 2 are going to be t minus 5, and then t plus 3. With these two factors, then I'm going to set each one of them equal to 0, and we'll do that mentally. T minus 5 equals 0. What goes in to make that 0? Of course, we know that is going to be t equals 5. My other solution is going to be t equals negative 3. So these are my two possible solutions. All right, now I've got to do my check, and this check is going to be a little bit different because we don't just have one thing to check, we actually have two things to check. So here we go. We're going to, of course, write down the original problem, 2t plus 15, all that underneath the square root, and then we want to see if that equals whatever our t value is. So if I go ahead and I'm going to check the t equals 5 first, so I'm going to write that down like this, t equals 5. And I want to see if this works, so I'll have 2 times 5 plus 15 underneath the square root, and I'm setting that equal to my value for t, which is 5. So 2 times 5 is 10 plus 15, that's underneath the radical there. Let's see if that equals 5, and 10 plus 15 is 25, so I'm going to have the square root of 25, and of course, the square root of 25 is 5. So t equals 5, yes, that is one of my solutions, yay! Now, if I do the same thing with t equals 3, so or not 3, but negative 3, so I'm going to check that with t equals negative 3, so t equals negative 3, I'm going to have 2 times negative 3 plus 15, and see if that is equal to negative 3, and of course all that's underneath the square root. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6 plus 15 underneath the square root is equal to negative 3, and negative 6 plus 15 is going to give me 9. Square root of 9 equals negative 3. Oh, and that's 3 equals negative 3? Nah, wah, wah, wah. Thanks for playing, but you are extraneous. Negative 3. So thanks for playing, but you don't get to count in this one. Now, of course, we could always kind of take a look at this and say if we were square rooting this, so if we go back and just kind of look at the blob that's underneath the square root, anytime you have the square root of some blob, all right, so whatever is underneath there, that cannot be equal to a negative number, ever. Okay, so you can have negatives underneath the square root. That's okay, because if you had like negative square root of 4, we know from algebra 2 stuff, that's just 2, and because we have a negative underneath there, it's going to be 2i, the imaginary root. All right, so we can take the square root of a negative number, but the square root of something cannot be a negative value. All right, so that's a little curve on this one right here. So be careful on that. You might be able to identify that real quickly, but make sure that you show the check to verify your solutions are correct and or extraneous. Alright, so that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and by now you totally should understand how to solve radical equations if you have a variable that is underneath the radical or square root. Alright, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.